Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Today we're playing White Banner versus Spiral Company and the scenario is Resilience Ops. For those who aren't aware, Corvus Belli recently released an Infinity Army update that included adding a whole number of the previously reinforcement gated profiles to a selection of vanilla or sectoral armies, so we're trying out some of those profiles in White Banner. So this list is, for me at least, a very standard White Banner list. It has a lot of the White Banner staples, multiple Longyars, Lankai in either a duo or Haris with Shaolin Monks, extra Shaolin Monks, etc., a Blue Wolf because Blue Wolves are awesome. But what we're doing here in particular using the previous reinforcement profiles is we're running a Haris of a Jujak, a Hate, and a Dobakai. So the Jujak needs to be in the Link team because you need to form this particular Haris team around either a Jujak, a Yimao, or a Shang-Chi. The first couple of versions of this list I was trying to write did include a Shang-Chi APHMG Tinbot -6 because I wanted to combine a Tinbot with the Dobakai KHD, but then I remembered that I hate Shang-Chis, they're terrible for their points cost. That's my take, nobody else's. But every time I try to include in a list or use that Shang-Chi APHMG profile, ultimately it comes back to the fact that it's a BS13 Armor 4 2-wound model that will die, and when it dies, it will take almost a tag's weight in points with it because it's paying for tons and tons of extras. So I really do not like Shang-Chi. Every time I try and use them, they take more away from the list than they give. So in this case, we're using a Jujak because that will get me a close assault model, very capable with a boarding shotgun and a Panzerfaust, and it will give me the Tinbot that I want to combine with the Dokubai. Dokubai Cyber Combat Unit was one of a couple of profiles that released with reinforcements that looked really, really cool, but I just didn't get to play with terribly much because Yujing were a little torturous to play reinforcements with, particularly Vanilla Yujing, which is what I tried them out with, I believe. But the profile has an absolute ton of potential, and so very happy to include this. The combination of a KHD with upgrade Spotlight is just like super fun. And it's the kind of piece that if you only take one hacker, you're still getting some useful value here. You will either be able to do some cyber combat against an opposing model, and you've got the Tinbot -6 plus the benefits of Trinity. It's only whip 13, but it is structure 2. There's an engineer in this list, so it can feasibly go toe-to-toe with quite a lot of opposing hackers. And if it's not doing that, then it's still a linkable model with a multi-pistol +1 burst, its own pitcher, admittedly only BS11, that can then just spotlight things. So super awesome. The Hairtay is doing all of the things that I want the Shang-Chi to do, but better and cheaper. It is admittedly one lower burst. The Shang-Chi would be burst 5 in the Haris team. The Hairtay will be burst 4, but a heavy rocket launcher is a far more dangerous ammunition type. It has an assault pistol for close assault. It still has tactical awareness. It's tougher with armor 5, which would matter actually this game. And on top of that, it just randomly has ballistic skill attack guided. And I really like that because splashing guided into it, like it's difficult to splash guided into a list. You need to use a troop slot to include a guided missile launcher. Then you need to be like, oh, all right, well, I need to have enough hacking to justify that. And you very quickly get into a feedback loop where you've devoted 3 or 4 troop slots to a guided module, which can be very good. But the fact that this list can devote 0 spare troop slots to a guided module, because I wanted this Harry's team in the list anyway, it's just some hacking. I randomly have guided in there as well. Now it's not explosive, but it is ballistic skill 20 when it's firing with the guided bonus. So just generally big fan of this Harry's team. And I think for the points cost, you just get a lot. You get a lot of little capabilities, plus a totally serviceable tactical awareness, decently fast gun. So this team was the thing that I wanted to test with the list, and it was not so expensive once I'd cut the Shang-Chi that I couldn't include all of the rest of the stuff that the list basically wanted. So this is my core. It's a 3-person core. We then have Lankai and 2 Shaolin Monks in Harry's team, a Blue Wolf, a Zhanchi LT, and a Decoy. If I was going to change this list and I had Balls of Absolute Steel, I would actually cut the Decoy for just a 7-point repeater remote, because you do kind of want that in your DZ in some situations. And that 4 points would allow me to upgrade one of these 2 Longyars to a shotgun Longyar, which I do really like having access to. But there are times where even my willingness to just let it all hang out in terms of obvious LTs is limited. And in this case, I had a game lined up against Ed, and Ed is a premier lieutenant hunter. He will almost always, for example, take a Greif in Spiral Core. I just wasn't willing to bear that particular risk this particular game. And for most people, that's probably a sensible option. Otherwise, we have 2 more unlinked Shaolins. Husong Yaokong Total Reaction Bot. 2 Long Yars, and then a Mech Engineer with Yao Zhao. This is the sort of like the defensive package. You can't always afford the Husong Yakong, but this is the defensive package that I like to include in White Banner. It's basically just a ton of dangerous enough remote presence robots with a Mech Engineer behind them. So your opponent will have to spend their time unpicking those pieces, and then if you've positioned them well, you can just pull them all back up again and carry on. And that's the second combat group. The second combat group basically takes care of your ablative defenses, and if it has orders spare, maybe it sends a Shaolin Monk or a Long Ya on an attack run. Everything else offensively and in terms of specialists and stuff is handled by the first combat group. This is basically just a solid, well-rounded list, and it was well suited to resilience operations, which we would be playing. Opposing White Banner would be Ed's Spiral list. Ed is experimenting in this list with what are the things that set Spiral Core apart from Toha in particular. Toha is a very good faction, and if you compare them to Spiral Core, Toha makes some sacrifices, but it gets basically a whole lot of muscle in exchange for those sacrifices. More wounds, more durability, more symbiomates, more symbio bombs, better like muscular gunfighting, just mimetism shooters, etc. What it gives up are a number of unique Spiral Core things that add up in total to kind of like a subtlety. Now, I will take those trades. I will play Toha more often than I'll play Spiral Core, but Ed is a master of helots and he will comfortably play Spiral Core instead, to great effect. But this list is experimenting with the points that differentiate Spiral Core from Toha. And it starts with Samsa, and in particular, Samsa is not obviously unique to Spiral Core, but Spiral Core can defend Samsa. And Ed's theory here is that Samsa's weakness is that it is an infiltrating piece without a marker state, so it can be quite vulnerable, but if it just gets to active turn, it can absolutely pop off because it's Super Jump, Mimetism, BS-13, Plasma Gunfighter. So what we have in terms of the package that will be defending Samsa is one of these 2 Dral AP Marksman Rifle mine layers. Will be dedicating at least their mine to defend Samsa, and there'll be Helot coverage as well. And between a Helot and a mine, and potentially a Dral, plus maybe some Overwatch or ARO pieces, the idea is that the list will keep Samsa alive until he can go on a tear. We then have the 2 Dral mine layers. These are excellent pieces. Both will be given symbiomates thanks to the Chain of Command, whereas a Chain of Command Kael'ta down here. So a Dral is only Ballistic Skill 13, but it has Mim 6 while its symbio armor is intact, and a Dral with massive forward deployment, mine layer, mines, AP Marksman Rifle, and a symbiomate is expensive for 40 points, but a good piece. We then have a Tagma MSV2 Viral Sniper, a Kriegel Agent, and a Kumatel Bioengineer. Kumatel is not a piece you would always take in this particular situation, but Ed has the points for it, and it can do things like bring the Tagma back. We have 3 Chaxa Auxiliaries, a War Correspondent, 2 Helot Militia, the Chain of Command Kael'ta, a Gryphop, because this is Ed, and he's very, very good with Gryph operators. And then here is an interesting choice that I like as well. Another thing that sort of sets Spiral Core apart is access to this Kriegel Lieutenant profile. Now, it's very cheap and also 0 SWC. And Ed is going to be using this for a mix of utility and actually gunfighting. In terms of utility, it's got Ferroware Tactics Eraser, Ferroware Tactics Mirror Ball, can do a fair bit with that. And then it has the Ferro Booster, which is one of the weirdest guns in the game, because it has the Comms Attack tag, which means it's affected by firewalls, but not by cover. And that means that if you're just shooting at something in cover inside good range bands, it's going to be burst 2 hitting on 16s with no cover penalty to the damage, which only burst 2, admittedly, but that can really just do some stuff, which is very interesting. Now, would I take this over, for example, a Takwheel Officer in Toha? No, I wouldn't. I would take the Takwheel Officer. But there is a points difference there, and this is trying to do things that Spiral can do uniquely. And because the Kael'ta Chain of Command is just going to be hiding on a rooftop somewhere, you can kind of safely use this Lieutenant profile to go and do things, and Ed would this game. So overall, I like this list a lot. As we get to deployment, you will see that the Tagma was actually disguised as Nima Satar, and I like that choice. We'll go into why when I get to deployment, but she was kind of like a fit that was conceivably in the list, matched the SWC, etc. And she lured me, the Tagma deploying as Nima lured me into not necessarily a mistake, but a deployment choice. I didn't have a great deal of options, but it set Ed up for a good first turn. So overall, I quite like this list. It's well-rounded. It has maybe slightly more cheerleadery elements, particularly with the War Core, although there is an advantage of War Correspondence in Spiral Core. You can never be completely sure that the War Core is not a Tagma Sniper until the turn begins and it isn't linked. But, obviously Chaxas are very solid, but you do have these 4 pieces here that are all kind of like not doing things, but there's nothing wrong with the Chaxa, and there is plenty of other active elements, particularly with the Dral and Samsa. This list should not run out of pieces to spend orders on in the first combat group. Now, this being resilience operations, the first thing that you do, technically before selecting lists, but Ed and I each just had a list we wanted to play, is you determine your tactical objectives. And this game threw up something that Resilience Ops is capable of doing, which I think makes it probably not necessarily suitable for like round 5 of a big event, but I do really like it in terms of its stated purpose, which is to be a random mission generator for Infinity. And it gave me these were the 3 tactical objectives that I picked. We have guard the supply lines, which requires me to control objectives in my deployments or in my half of the table. Decimate enemy forces, which just requires me to fight, and survive, which just requires me to survive. And so, in combination, these meant that I could play a very defensive, attritional, just last the game out, kill a couple of things, focus on stopping Ed from accomplishing whatever I thought his objectives were, and potentially just get a win off the back of that by pursuing a nominally quite defensive style of play. And you can only do that if you draw objectives like these, but it's a different play experience. It's a different sort of like theory of victory in this particular game that was determined by drawing these cards. And you get that sometimes, like in the rare occasion, like when Resilience Operations throws up like combination objectives like this. It is continually serving to be a game mode that is really quite good at presenting different enough experiences to be interesting and worth continuing to play. So I think I have some negative opinions, for example, on reinforcements, which I've spoken about previously, but I think Resilience Operations as a game mode has been a great success, and I would be very happy to see it played in events, probably not in the last round, but in the first few rounds. I think it's a great fit, and it's going to be consistently different. Almost any list will work for it, and this promised to be a really interesting game. My objective basically was survive, and if I survived, I was probably in a good position to win. Now, we do the lieutenant roll off. Ed wins the roll by rolling a 12. I roll a failure, and Ed elects to go first, relatively confidently, which suggests to me that he's got some kind of objective that he can do potentially on the first turn as one of the things that he's looking to do. And indeed, the first turn would confirm that. In terms of battlefield conditions, Ed plays the one that gives all troopers +1 to their first move, all troopers with multi-terrain total +2 to their first move, which means we're going to have some really zoomy troopers this game. Ed's Draal are going to be 8-2 move. My Blue Wolf is going to be 8-4 move, which is extremely zippy and would be quite relevant. I was given a choice of place 2 saturation zones and place 2 saturation zones, so I chose to place 2 saturation zones, but I was basically happy with that. I can make that work. I have defensive pieces that are either high burst or low burst, so we put down the 2 saturation zones here, just blocking a fair bit of line of fire on and through the midfield. For Ed's deployment, he's got his 3-person Harry's team over here. Nima Satar, quote unquote, is hanging out back here with the bioengineer, and the Kriegel agent is somewhere down here as well, all basically in position to move up and over this bridge if needed. We've got the 2 Draal, one is here and one is here. Both of them have laid their mines, and this mine is in position to protect Samsa, who is here. We have Helots here, and there's another one on the ground level here, both of which will use their irregular orders on the first turn to move up and defend, for example, any approaches to Samsa in order to keep him alive. This is one of the things I think as you get better with using Helots you really need to do, is you need to, especially for going first, have plans to move them forward into even more annoying positions. The usual rules of thumb for Helots apply. Never have them looking at something that isn't a good range band for them. Never have them attempting to bracket the opponent deployment zone. Always force your opponent to make multiple moves to engage them, that kind of thing. Usual rules of thumb for good ARO play. But in this particular case, Ed had a plan for how to move them on the first turn to get them out of the DZ and watching the midfield, and he executed that very, very well. Otherwise, Ed has Chaxes scattered around, a war correspondent standing here, and his reserve job would be a Greif operator, which we'll get to. For my part, I make, basically, because I decided that my objective for the game was to survive, and I chose this deployment side because I can cluster all 3 of my objectives here. This is one of the things that might potentially warrant changing with resilience operations, particularly if it sees regular tournament play. It's just some kind of a rule saying that the beacons and objectives can't be deployed within a certain range of other elements of the same type, because you can do what I did here, which is all three of these objectives are clustered closely enough together that a single small based model can sit in between three of them and touch and control all of them, which was, surprise, surprise, the end state I was hoping to reach on the final turn. I think the game mode would benefit from maybe forcing them to, say, not be in zone of control or not within 4 inches of each other. Personal opinion. Otherwise, my beacons are spread out to positions. I've made it as difficult as possible for Ed to get to and see them, but one of Ed's objectives is going to be to destroy at least one of my beacons, and he has a Greif operator who is going to be able to do that. I have my first Longya comes down here with its mine watching through this building. I have my Haris team, that's the cyber combat unit, the Hayate, not Hwarang. One of the pieces missing from my list I would have liked to include it was a Hwarang, basically a Tanko at home style piece, but I couldn't take it in the Haris team. I would have if I'd had a Shang-Chi, but I didn't want a Shang-Chi. So we have the Jujak, the Dobakai, and the Hayate all deployed in sort of this position here. The Hete in particular is deployed. It's got a long line across the table into this doorway here, underneath the bridge, so that if this Drow stands up, yeah, I'll be shooting on probably 1 dice on 2s, but it's going to have an equally hard time shooting back at me, and if it comes up and around through this door, I will get a chance to shoot it as it moves. We have the Blue Wolf hanging out back here. In reactive turn, particularly my first reactive turn, I am scared of the Blue Wolf being gone on by Droll, smoke shooting from Tagmas, etc. So it's behind the biggest piece of terrain that I can because I want it to be active. Otherwise, we have Liang Kai down here with two Shaolin monks linked to him. One of them is up here somewhere and one of them is here. Both of those are slightly exposed models, and this is an intentional choice. Against anything other than Tagma viral shooting, the fact that there's, say, the saturation zone here means that opponents will be at reduced burst against me. I can fire full burst 2 on 16 smoke, and I'm benefiting from cover. And that actually makes it surprisingly difficult to take down what is otherwise a 5-point pleb warband model. So I'm hoping that this monk here in particular will draw some fire. We have another monk down here, and then we have the total reaction bot hiding behind this building. It's looking to not see either of the Drow, basically. I don't want to have that fight. It would be too easy for the Drow to immediately get inside 24 inches of me and fight on 13s to my 5s. Which is admittedly not the worst possible, like it's not a terrible face-to-face, but I don't really want to take that if I can avoid it until the Droll have made multiple moves. What I am doing is I'm attempting to pin down the Link team over here, so there's another line across the board like that, and that is an excellent decision if Nima Satar is Nima Satar, but of course Nima Satar is not. She's a Tagma sniper, and I have let Ed get one over me in that respect. My reserve is the second Longya, and that's important because I suspect there of being a Greif operator, and indeed there is. Ed does not get fancy with the Greif operator, deploys it in near base contact with this beacon, which very quickly telegraphs that Ed is looking to destroy that beacon. So I set up to punish regardless. I wanted to just make sure that this Greif operator didn't get to do anything particularly ballsy. And just on the very off chance that the Greif operator did want to make a run in this direction, I block it from doing so with the 2 camouflage markers. However, that's not the case. The game begins. I'll attempt to take orders from Ed's first combat group. I take just one order, which reveals the presence of a Tagma, although that's not a huge surprise. And Ed's first activation is to activate this Greif operator, walk into base contact with the beacon, and slap a decharge to it. Now, my testicles recede into my body when he passes both the mine save and the chain rifle save from this Shaolin monk, but fortunately Liang Kai firing a shotgun at long range lands 1 hit, which does put the Greif operator unconscious. The Greif's decharge does 2 structure to this beacon. Beacons have got 3 structure, and if Ed's objective is to destroy a beacon, or 2 structure damage to a beacon, which it almost certainly is, he's gotten 2 of those 3 points already. You can repair beacons, but to my knowledge the usual rules for failing the roll and damaging them applies, so I'm not in a hurry to fail a Whip 13 roll and give Ed a point. So I kind of accept that beacon's lost 2 wounds already, Ed's on the board, but it cost him an order and a 21-point model, which is fair enough. The next thing that Ed does is he sets up to take down the total reaction bot. And I kind of know what's happening here as soon as he throws smoke he fires 2 shots with the Kriegel with the smoky grenade launcher, and then Nima moves up and around. And it's like, oh, Nima's moving forward. Yeah, okay, cool. It's a Tagma viral sniper. You got me. The Tagma shoots. It is fortunately shooting through the saturation zones, which means it's only burst 2, but it's that range, it's guaranteed to be putting the poor TR bot on a neg 12, so I dodge. Fail the dodge. take 2 hits, pass 2 of the viral saves, but fail 2, so the TR bot goes unconscious. There is a helper bot on ground level behind it, just here. So Ed then spends actually quite a few more orders. I think it takes him 2 or 3 more orders to shoot, miss, shoot, and eventually put down the TR bot all the way to dead so that I can't repair it. And that's a good decision on his part because I would 100% have repaired it. But for my part, I'm basically okay with trading that for 4 orders from Ed's primary combat group because it severely limits his ability to really do that much more damage on the first turn. However, we do have, this is the game of extremely zippy Draal, and so this Draal back here starts moving 8-2 around here. It moves into range of and then successfully dodges the mine that the Longya had deployed, and then it starts engaging with the Hwarang. And this, no, not Hwarang, who Hayate. Sorry, too many names starting with H, and I've not used it before. Hayate, the big guy. This is Tariq Mansouri, obviously, but the big guy with the heavy rocket launcher. And this is one of those fights where the advantage of the Hayate being armor 5 over the Shangji being armor 4 really matters, because I passed 2 saves thanks to armor 5 halving down to 3. Hayate is fine, and a Shaolin monk succeeds in a dodge coming around after the Draal. The Draal pulls back, back around this way, attempts to engage me again, and I successfully get smoked down. This is a linked Shaolin monk, it's dodged into cover, so the Draal is firing 3 dice on 13s, I'm shooting 2 dice on 16s for smoke, so that's a pretty straightforward engagement. Well done basically to the Shaolin monk being Haris linked. Between it and the extra armor on the Hete, it's completely stalled Ed's offense, and that's most of what Ed can do on this first turn. He moves some things around, Chaxes move up, the Helots move up, otherwise sets up a defensive position, but he does not have really any orders left in the first combat group, and he's elected to leave. He's moved the chain of command Kael'thar back, but he's moved the Tagma Sniper up into this tower. Now, it's a Harry Sling Tagma Sniper. I suspect he should probably have dropped it prone. It is much more of a threat to me in active turn than reactive. In reactive turn, in its reactive, I absolutely have guns that can bring it down. It's only ballistic skill 12. I've got a burst 4 heavy rocket launcher. I've got a burst 5 AP Spitfire. I can put that thing in the dirt, and indeed that is what I do. So the first turn for me is spent moving I do a couple of things. The first thing I want to do is I want to sort of clear out this space here to the extent that I can, and I want to put down the Tagma. So the blue wolf starts moving 8-4 up and around here, gets to sort of this position behind this building, engages the Tagma, and puts it down in one go. Excellent, job's a good one. And then I move this Haris team forward, because I want to deal with, we've got a Draal here and Samsa here, and ideally I want to put both of them down, but I don't want to run the gauntlet into Helots. By this point, Ed has advanced both of his Helots to be like watching these positions here, and I just don't want to take that fight if I can avoid it. A very good rule of thumb against Ed in particular is just don't fight the Helots. If you can avoid fighting the Helots, just don't. They want it more, they will crit you, they're always positioned well. Do not fight the Helots, that is playing into Ed's game. So we move up the cyber combat team and we fire 2 pitches, basically just attempting to land both of them inside this building where they will give me good network protection over that part of the board. But I roll some 15s and some 16s, and one of the downsides of the Dokubai is that it is only ballistic skill 11. You get a lot for the 25 points you pay for that model, but ballistic skill 11 pitches will fail a lot, and they both fail in this particular case. Now, it's not the end of the world, and to be perfectly honest, I think attempting multiple Whip 13 spotlights against Whip 13 opponents might have been a way to tank this entire turn. But I did still attempt to go for it. It would have been good to have those repeaters there just in order to stymie Ed's future turn, but it was not to be. That's fine. Shaolin Monk Harry's team activate. And this render of this turn was a wonderful demonstrator in the fact that Shaolin monks have stealth, and this is one of the few things that genuinely sets them apart. They're quite good martial artists, but it's one of the few things that genuinely sets them apart from other warbands, things like Morlocks, is that you can actually get into melee without your opponent dodging away. So with the Tagma Sniper down, thanks to the Blue Wolf, they move up and around. They avoid getting within 8 inches of this Drow that has pulled back to the position it was previously in. I get smoked down here, and then I run up through the smoke. Staying in the smoke, I get a Shaolin Monk into combat with a Drow, and I managed to avoid something that happened, I think, 3 times during N3, which was that a Shaolin Monk would get into CC with a Drow, and then immediately get crit by a viral pistol. In this particular case, it takes me 3 orders to get through the Symbiomate and put the Drow down, but the Shaolin Monk does. 2 or 3 orders. Puts the Drow down, and then I still have smoke here. I have a few orders left, including an O12 Prestige order, and I think I convert an irregular order regular. I decide I can't go after Samsa, and that's just going to have to be what it can. Like, Ed wanted to defend that, and I've given it to him. There's too many mines and helots around, but I can get out of the smoke, up and over this bridge with Lang Kai and one Shaolin Monk, and we get Lang Kai into CC with the Kriegel agent and put him down, and then we just leave them on the rooftop. That'll do. Those pieces are already exposed. I think there was a pretty okay argument, given how far I extended just to get like a 20-something point kill. I think I could feasibly have pulled the entire Haris team back and hunkered down, but I was a bit concerned about. I already had the Hete, Jujak, and Dokubai team in this space, and the Blue Wolf. I wanted to spread my forces because I had the suspicion that Samsa was going to go active next turn. And if I clustered things even more, I was just asking for plasma templates to clip things that I did not want plasma templates to clip. So we can see at the beginning of round 2, we've got models that I've positioned onto this rooftop just to try and keep them safe. This smoke is left over from last turn. Please ignore it. Something I think I may have missed last turn is Ed's Kriegel agent went on a little bit of a run. I think it discovered and put down this Longya, and I recovered it the previous turn. Otherwise, this is a terrible photo in many respects because tons of stuff is hiding behind this building over here. We have the Blue Wolf. We have at least one Shaolin Monk. We have 2/3 of the heavy infantry Haris team, but otherwise this is how the game has developed. So Ed's second turn begins, and he's down a Draal, he's down a Tagma and a Kriegel, but he's only it's a fair bit of tooth that's down, but not a lot of orders. So this is the Samsa turn. Although first Ed attempts to clear the way of single wound template pieces that would be an issue. So this Kriegel agent continues to crawl up and along here until it gets in on this Shaolin Monk. There's an exchange of fire, and I believe it puts the Shaolin Monk down after like a couple of orders. Likewise, okay, that frees up Samsa. So Samsa, Lang Kai is in that awkward position. We can't quite watch everything that he wants to, and that lets Samsa get up and around into Lang Kai's back arc and puts him down cleanly. So I lose this Shaolin Monk and Lang Kai. I am able to get smoked down with this monk here, which will keep it safe for the remainder of the turn. Ed then spends like a spare cheeky order firing a very long range medikit at the downed Draal over here. He does miss, calls it there, and then moves on with Samsa. Samsa moves in to engage the Link team, and I make a dodge with the with the Jujak to get it away from the Dokubai. This will break the Haris team, so I'm just firing a single template, but it also means that the Dokubai can start spotlighting. I do spotlight Samsa, that's not going to matter, because Samsa engages the Jujak, and after 2 face-to-face rolls, he puts the Jujak down, but he goes down himself. Now that's still, Samsa was 30 points, and he's put down 21 point Lang Kai, 28 point Jujak. He's done totally serviceably, and he's died in the process. But that's basically an okay run, particularly given, as it turns out, Ed has his own missions that involve surviving/killing, etc. Ed, otherwise, this turn is a bit limited in what he can do. He is now down to basically, he's used most of the orders on this Kriegel, which will end up stranded on this bridge. He can't really get this Draal out of cover. I think he tries like one more paramedic shot and misses again. And that's the bulk of the turn that he gets to play. So I roll into my second turn, and I'm down most of the Shaolin Monk Haris and the Hete, Dokubai Jujak team is now broken up. Those models are I can't reform the link again because the Jujak is dead. But those models will perform basically fine by themselves, and I also don't need to do a great deal with them. In fact, most of this turn is going to be fairly limited in terms of what I attempted to accomplish because my goals are just to kill and survive. I'm just running out the clock until the last turn when I can seize all 3 of these objectives. So I do use the Blue Wolf to come around and put down his lieutenant. Not going to put him in loss of lieutenant. There is an obvious chain of command model on the roof, but it's still points killed. And then we pull the Blue Wolf back. After that, I get the Dokubai Cyber Combat unit, and I think most of the rest of this turn is literally spending, I think, 4 orders to spotlight the unconscious Draal so I can fire a missile at it with a Hayate, just because I don't want that thing coming back. It's too much of a pain. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with anything being in this part of the table. I want that area to be safe. So I think it takes 6 total orders to put an unconscious Draal down, and this is what happens when you try and spotlight with Whip 13 models. But I do put the Draal down, I move the Hayate back to its original position, and then the rest of my orders are just spent laying mines, recamoing, going into suppression, generally setting up a continued defensive posture, which accomplishes a couple of things. The first thing it accomplishes is not requiring me to fight helots, which is, as we mentioned, a condition of victory against Ed. And the second thing it does is it just sets me up for that long game. It forces Ed to come into me, and although my list is actually it's fairly well positioned, it's fairly well appointed to defend, Ed's list is more appointed to defend and play a subtle offensive game than try and brute force his way through suppressive fire tags and camouflaged minefields, etc. So we roll into Ed's third turn, and it is finally time for the Draal to make a run. It has to go for it. It's the last offensive piece. Ed still has plenty of orders to funnel through this, because really I've only killed, I've killed a fair bit of his first combat group, but he's got intact cheerleaders. The Draal is a viable offensive piece. He's not hurting for things to do, and so the Draal moves out. And so what she does is she moves out, she dodges the Hayate's long-range missile shot, rocket shot, gets to here, pops down one beeper, kind of showing what Ed's second objective is going to be, comes down here, pops down another beeper, makes her way around here, dodges a mine, this one, gets into base contact with this beacon, and places her decharge, doing the last point of damage to it, and then gets back around to here and holds up in this position. And that's a hell of a performance. Like, by herself, she has potentially just accomplished like three of the 10 total objective points Ed could secure this game, and Draal in resilience operations are great pieces. However, that performance is probably not enough to stop me from accomplishing the goals that I wanted to accomplish. So what I'll do is at the beginning of my turn, I will pop this Longya into the first combat group, which leaves the Draal did destroy this one, but that leaves basically just the engineer, I think, in combat group 2, and we are going to start to do the things we want to do. So the first thing is that a Shaolin monk that has worked its way forward to here will just throw some smoke down to get away from the Draal and run into the little circle of objectives here, and that's a 5-point model that's scoring me 3 objective points. Other than that, what I'm looking to do is try and stop Ed from scoring his beeper objective. If I can destroy both of those beepers, then what I will be able to do is he will not have the 1 extra point for securing more objectives than I have, because kill and be killed objectives are almost impossible not to score at least 1 point on. And so by accomplishing both of those and my secure the 3 objectives scenario, I'm setting myself up for basically a high scoring game, but also likely to get that 1 extra point for scoring more objectives than Ed. So the rest of this turn is pretty much just the Longya. Like, there's some stuff that's in the way. The Blue Wolf will do a few things, but the main thing is that this Longya will come up and around over here, moving prone. I think I force a Helot to discover me, and then I take it out with the Blue Wolf. And then so the Longya will take down this beeper over here. Then it will jump down here, come around this way, attempt to engage the Draal, which is wounded, fail, 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 and at that point I have 1 order left, so the last thing the Longya does is move 7 inches because of the battlefield condition over here, engage and destroy this beeper, although it dies in the process to the Draal. I do some math before I make that run, just to make sure that losing the Longya won't put me down a threshold in terms of survive, but it won't. The middle threshold of survive is quite big, and I've clipped down into, I don't have 75% of my army alive. Ed has killed more than that, but I have comfortably I think it's between 50 and 75% remaining, so it's okay if the Longya dies, and indeed it does die, killing Ed's second beeper. So at that point, Ed reveals that his objectives were to deal at least 3 structure to a beacon, which he has accomplished. He's gotten 3 points that way. It was to place the 2 beepers, which I have prevented him from doing, so he does not get any points from that. And then his third objective was also to survive, and he has at least half of his army remaining, so he gets 2 points that way. For my part, I have killed, so my objectives, if we recall, were to survive. I have half of my army remaining, and to kill, and I have destroyed enough to get me into the second bracket of destroy, and then it was to accomplish 3 objectives, and this is the big money. This gets me over the line, which gives me the 1 extra point for scoring more objectives than Ed has. So Ed secures 5 points total, which is a perfectly good result. That's what you're basically, that's the kind of minimum you're looking to get in a scenario like this. But with that run onto the objectives, again, it's a favorable draw. I got quite lucky with the scenario draw in this case. I'm able to throw myself over the line to 8 points. So that wraps the game up. Now, in terms of what I wanted to do, which was to test the Heite and Dokubai team, they didn't really do anything this game. They didn't really get to fight, and that's a consequence of how I played this game and how I deployed them. Because I decided that basically like all of the action for me would happen around here, I deployed everything in that space. And because I deployed everything in that space, I had a blue wolf in that space. And because I had a blue wolf, the blue wolf did all of the work. Because in the scenario with the battlefield condition that Ed chose, it was 8-4 movement. So it just zipped around, killing anything that it wanted to engage, and then pulled back to cover. It was just the most efficient piece to engage all of the things that I wanted to engage with. In another scenario, the correct play would usually be to split those elements up so that you have, say, different offensive paths around the battle. And in that case, I actually think this was really promising. I really like that Harry's team. It did the things I wanted to do, apart from missing 2 pitcher shots. And so broadly, yeah, even though this game they were just middleweight performers, they offer a lot of promise and they give me the kind of thing that I like, which is those high performance, low model count Haris team kind of things, where no individual piece is super expensive. Losing any one of those pieces in the Haris team doesn't mean the Haris team is useless. All of them can do something. Even the Jujak can close assault with a shotgun. And it's the kind of piece that I like, where it's mobile, it's got tactical awareness, it's got a couple of fast pieces in it, it's self-sufficient, it's got tactical awareness, it can gunfight, etc. And it doesn't impose a crushing like 5 trooper impost on my list. It's a very small list footprint, which gives me more space for Longyars and Shaolin monks and the Blue Wolf, etc. So yeah, broad impressions, very favorable. In fact, I would say that pretty much all of the reinforcement profiles that they've added to vanilla and sectoral armies add something meaningful to a lot of those lists. I think exceptions would be, I don't see a huge amount of use for the O12 ones. Pretty much all of the O12 sect reinforcement profiles are very sort of like single wound expensive things, and there's plenty of those in O12 already. The Hack Islam ones, I am struggling to fit into lists because I don't really need them in. Like, I love, as a reinforcement profile, I love the engineering unit. I forget what it's called, but it's the one with the no winning cap, mimetism, so effectively 2 wounds, heavy flamethrower, assault situation. That does not work as well when you deploy it in your deployment zone. Kind of likewise, Apaches in Ariadna don't add a great deal that Ariadna can't already do, but Apaches are still exceptional, not expensive profiles. I've already written one list for Ariadna that just slaps 2 Apaches in there and still lets you afford basically everything else, and there's a non-zero chance that one of those 2, even though they're DZ bound in vanilla Ariadna, not arriving as reinforcements, they'll do something that kicks ass because they're a +1 burst, light shotgun, no wounding cap, super jump, blah 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 blah. Other really outstanding additions are, I think, OSS has just radically changed. Like, OSS is different now that all of those the combat remotes being added, the CC remotes being added to OSS significantly change how you can build the faction. I think we're going to see some very interesting, very different, or maybe not very different, but like interestingly textured OSS lists coming out of the change. And I think Pan-Oceania has kind of benefited in some slightly more subtle ways as well. I even like the extra in the factions that they have been added to, Vanilla Combined. Extra profiles of Vanilla Combined and Onyx. Extra profiles are not like outstanding, but they're not terrible either. They're kind of interesting. It'll be curious to see. I might experiment with some of those myself. So broadly, all good additions, although I am cognizant that one of the things that Corvus Belli mentioned in their blog post is that they are aware of the risk of profile bloat. And definitely some vanilla factions are now at a stage where just trying to scroll through all of the models that is in a vanilla faction is a little overwhelming. So I kind of respect the decision that Corvus Belli made initially to restrict these profiles to just reinforcements to sort of like ease accessibility for players. Vanilla can be a little overwhelming already, and it's more overwhelming now. But ultimately, I think their hand was kind of forced. Reinforcements has not been the success that they hoped it would be, and if they're going to sell these models, they need to make them usable by players. And the answer to doing that was to put them in factions, put them in sectorals. They fit much better in sectorals than in vanilla in terms of that model bloat situation. But just in terms of model sales, you needed to make them available to basically to everyone, which means adding them to both vanilla and sectorals. In terms, therefore, of reinforcements as a game mode, I think the changes that Corvus Belli has made are a step in the right direction. It's interesting to note that their internal testing, when they were aiming for reinforcements to be officially compatible with non-reinforcements, was they made comlink so expensive as a balancing tool against non-reinforcements armies. And the impression of the community is that that's the opposite of what was needed. The community's impression, and I'm mixed on this myself, I don't really know which way I'm going. I've tried playing with and against reinforcements, using reinforcements and non-reinforcements armies, and I'm not convinced that the community is totally on point with the assessment that non-reinforcement armies are always favored against reinforcement armies. But it is interesting that Corvus Belli's internal balance appraisal was that reinforcement armies needed to be restrained by expensive comlinks. I think, though, just in terms of the player experience of building a reinforcement list, not making the comlink such an obvious taxation piece, I think it makes it at least more enjoyable to write reinforcements lists. I do think, though, that it's going to be down to the community at this point to use reinforcements in a way that is interesting for us and for the game. And I think that's going to mean just trying out, like communities are going to need to just try out some reinforcements optional events where you can pick whether on an individualist basis whether to play reinforcements or not. I think that's kind of the way forward for the format, or at least it's worth us experimenting with it to see if that is the case. Because I do not think that reinforcements versus reinforcements is a long-term interesting game mode. This is something that I've discussed on the channel before. But for those who haven't heard that perspective, the basic point is that reinforcements lists tend to have a very similar game experience every game, where it's almost always the case that reinforcements will arrive on turn 3 and then do something dynamic and flashy, but it means that reinforcements versus reinforcements games feel like a mirror match regardless of the faction that you're playing. The experience is always heavily telegraphed, and I don't really see the point of playing a game where I know what's going to happen 2 turns in advance. That means that the interesting experience is when you have an asymmetric conflict, which is reinforcements versus non-reinforcements. So we want to see, is there a way that we can encourage that, and is it balanced? Does the community feel that it works as is with the changes that have been made, changes to comlinks, etc.? We probably just have to roll up our sleeves and find out at this point and make it work ourselves. And if the community makes it work, then Corvus Belli will make it work. That's my broad opinion at this early stage on the reinforcements changes. It's better, but I'm still not super keen on it as the rules currently suggest that it be played. The profiles, though, yep, we have a little bit of a bloat issue, particularly with vanilla factions at the moment, but the profiles are all basically cool and interesting, and it's always cool to see more stuff added to the game, more things to play with. In this particular game, I enjoyed trying out all of the new pieces, for all that I have failed to pronounce them correctly basically this entire battle report, and I look forward to playing with them more in future. Now, as always, if you like the things that I'm doing, if you like this video, you can support me via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description. I do take game and list and scenario requests within reason from channel supporters. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy this, and as always, I will see you next time.